Thank you all for being here. So we're going to talk about the DOM a little bit. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to describe the DOM, and I hope you'll be able to manipulate the DOM a little bit as well. So in your research on what the DOM is, what did you discover? Enlighten me.
The DOM is an API.
The DOM is an API. That was like kind of an eye-opener for me when I was learning this. What else?
DOM's a model of the document
Indeed.
that forms the page.
Correct.
So like the HTML, when we write it, when we're writing things in like tags, they're turned into nodes, and then that's parsed by the browser and makes the DOM.
Tags to nodes is like maybe the most important part of understanding this.
Is that, so when I was like reading that, is that similar to, you know how we do like Node.js or whatever, is that the same use of the word node, or is that a different?
Not useful to think of it that way.
Okay.
Cool, what else do you guys find?
So when you have the DOM, it allows your scripts to enter into your HTML and manipulate them.
Yes, a little bit. Let's, my caveat on that is just that when we start talking about the DOM, we basically don't want to talk about the tags anymore. So HTML from a data type standpoint, any guesses what data type HTML is? String. Just, it's one string. So if I had something like outer and something like that, that's my HTML. You may as well just put quotes around it. It's just a string. However, it gets parsed into the DOM by your browser. So this becomes an outer node that has a child inner node. And if I put a p tag on this that says hi, then this also has a p node which has a text node off of it that's value is hi. It's turning this string of tags into a tree.
Node tree.
Node tree.
Nerd tree.
Nerd tree? Is that a Vim joke? So this is HTML. This is the DOM. Another important concept to this is that once your browser turns the HTML into the DOM, the HTML doesn't exist anymore. It is done. Does not matter what you write. If you change the file, like none of that shit matters. The only purpose of the HTML is for your browser to ingest it and turn it into the DOM. If you want to do something with it after your browser has turned it into the DOM, well, that's our second objective, is learning to manipulate it via the DOM API.
Does that mean that the DOM doesn't read the CSS or JavaScript, or does that through the node that like links the script tags and the...
Great question. So I load in a linked style sheet also. Every time something changes in the DOM, what happens is it looks through all of those rules and sees if it needs to append. I'm trying to think if it's a property or another node off of this. I'm almost positive it's a property. But these are objects. And so they have things like style properties, which are equal to whatever the rule in the CSS was. And your browser knows to look at those and figure out how to render them based on the style rules.
Why not just write the code in nodes?
That's exactly what you have to do to manipulate the DOM. As you guys are going to see, it's gnarly as fuck to do that. It's just verbose, like unnecessarily verbose. And so you go, okay, well, is there a shorthand that we could use to like be a little bit more expressive with this? Yes, it's called HTML. Cool. Other questions about what the DOM is? All right, so I want to do this. I'm going to write out some HTML, and I want you guys to draw the DOM tree that that's going to turn into.
Should we get whiteboard?
You can either like get a whiteboard, or you can do it on the desk if you want. Either one's fine with me. Actually, I'm going to do this on the text editor. We have a little bit of a marker problem here, but other than that, it's a pretty good school.
I know, I was very happy that I was already standing. I started walking. I was walk by, I'm like, oh, I don't know, I don't know.
Cool, there you go. Draw out the DOM tree for this. So, something to keep in mind. A couple of you caught this, a couple of you haven't. When you have text in here, that's a node also. It's not a property of the p tag. It's its own node. It just doesn't have a tag on it.
So you're saying, so paragraph 1 would be off main, paragraph 2 would be off main, as opposed to using p as a node?
So Emily, explain how it works. You got it right.
So main is a node, and it has 2 children, and those are P's, and those each have a child, which is text.
Yes. It's a special kind of node called a text node.
Is that true of the image, like our source and alt nodes?
No, they're not.
Oh.
Any guesses what the source and alt are?
Properties.
Properties of the node.
Interesting. How do you draw that in a tree?
You don't.
Okay.
Cool. So let's take a look at this in the browser. So if I serve this up, all right, I pull open the console, and I do something like console log document. Oh shoot! Firefox, Chrome DevTools tries to be helpful and rewrites it out as the HTML. How I can, maybe if I do document query selector. Nope, same thing. All right, it's trying to be helpful, but that's a DOM node.
You have Firefox installed. It'd be interesting to see what the difference is.
Yeah, I don't know how to use the DevTools on it anymore, though. So this is a new one. I installed Quantum this morning. Jeez, that is fucking fast. They aren't kidding. So there might not be a REPL on this. Let's see. Web developer. Web console. There we go. We'll do document. Or see, console log document. Hey, that's more like kind of what I was expecting. So we got this HTML document node here. These are all properties on it. Child nodes. Hey, what's the first one? HTML. Cool. Does it have child nodes also? Why, yes, it does. It has 3 of them. It's got a head. It has this text node. It has the body. I don't know what that text node is. Inside the body, do you have child nodes? Why, yes, you do. Inside of main, do you have child nodes? Why, yes, you do. Here's a p tag. Do you have child nodes? Yes, you do. You have this text node. When I look at that, the data for that text node is paragraph 1, and it has all this other crap. Text, content, whole text. So I could just as easily access that by like getting the top level document node and then doing like dot child nodes 0, dot child nodes 2, dot child nodes, and then once I get down to this bottom one, child nodes 1 dot what is it? Text content, and get paragraph 1 back. This is the API part of it, because then I can also set the value of that to something else. I also make my own child nodes and append them to other DOM elements. This is what your page is actually working with, not the HTML. It turns the HTML into this. Questions?
So in a real life context, you would use it like if the button is clicked, then set the property of paragraph 1 to great job picking the button.
Yeah, absolutely. So first goal was to be able to describe the DOM. Think about, somebody's going to ask you this in an interview, what you're going to say. What's the DOM? Turn and talk to a neighbor.
The DOM is a representation of the HTML document that is made by your browser and functions like a tree with nodes branching off. How about you? What is your DOM?
My DOM is a power structure that is
objects.
Document object.
Because it's making objects out of all of them.
Out of all the elements. I don't really know what the difference between a node and an object. Are nodes?
For
nodes
our
all-
purposes right now, don't worry about that.
Okay, I'm not worried about
It is available to you as an object. Conceptually, these are nodes, right? That's how you think of it conceptually. When you're actually working with it, you're working with objects.
exactly.
Okay, wrap up your conversations.
So, we're having trouble comprehending why.
Well, why?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Just because, like, is it because the other languages don't know how to read the HTML because it's in a string?
One of the things that we want to do in this program is demagic lots of things. This is just some fucking characters. How does your browser know how to turn that into white background, black text? The H1 is a little bit bigger. Magic? So under the hood, what the magic is it takes this, turns it into a tree, has style nodes, some of which you make, some of which are built into the browser. Not style nodes, style sheets. Some of which you wrote, some of which are just built into the browser, applies it to that tree, and then has rules about okay, if this object has this property, display it this way.
Okay.
That's a thing that browser can understand. Absent the DOM, this is just a bunch of characters.
Okay.
So we want it to be instructions on how we want the page to display. As it's processing those instructions, the intermediary state that it's in before we get down to beeps and boops and shit is the DOM.
Okay.
So then the processor it gets parsed again and then turned into the visual
Yes.
pixels.
Okay, so HTML is parsed into the DOM. The DOM is rendered. Those are your vocab words for that.
You did pixels.
Yes. HTML is parsed into the DOM, so it's string to a tree. That tree is rendered in your browser, so it displays a certain way. So, Sarah, why? Why the DOM?
To demagicify. To be able to actually tell the browser what to do with the characters that you have written.
Nice.
Is it fair to think of the HTML kind of is your blueprint?
Yes,
And then
exactly.
you're handing it over and it's being interpreted.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. What else? Other questions about what the DOM is, why we care? Cool. So we have described the DOM. Now it's time to manipulate the DOM. So now that it's parsed into this tree, we can do shit with it with JavaScript. So let's start by just doing it in the browser. Just gonna run it. Okay, so I have this page here. Does the HTML exist now?
No.
No. What exists?
The DOM.
The DOM. So if I want to make a new DOM element, I can't type HTML out. The tree's already started to get rendered. So I have to make a node directly. Let's say I want to make a new paragraph, paragraph 3. So I'm going to say $paragraph. The reason I put $sign on this, it's just a character. it could be no $sign. It could be, I think, like an underscore and like a handful of other things. But when you're representing an element convention, start with a $sign. So I'm going to say document.createElement, and I can make any element I want. I could make it a P. Funny story, I could actually make it a Broncos element or something like that, and it'll make a new Broncos element. The DOM cares not about your semantics. So I make a P tag. Cool. And now if I console log paragraph, I get a P tag. So nothing in it though. If I want to put text in there, what do I have to do?
Not text.
Hmm?
Content? No.
You could, if you want to
What
do
is
it
the
wrong.
text node?
I need to make a text node. So I might make one that's something like paragraph text is document.createTextNode. This is an element, and I'm going to call pass paragraph 3 into that. So I've made an element that's a P tag. I've made a text node and put the text into it. So I have both of these things now. Any guesses what I have to do next?
I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So does it know that you're putting the text into that paragraph because you're doing it all in one session?
No.
Okay.
That's just
Put
it.
into the,
I need to attach these somehow.
okay.
So I do paragraph dot append child. And what is the child that I'm appending? Why, it's this paragraph text. Cool. So I've made a P tag. I've made a text node. I've appended the text node to the P tag. What's the last step to get this on the page?
Yeah, put it somewhere on the page, so in like main something.
Yep. So if I do something like main is document.querySelector. This does the same thing, by the way, as get element by ID, get elements by class name, get elements by tag name. I hate all three of those methods. They're like super compatible. They've been around since like the beginning of the DOM. I think they are really unwieldy to use. I prefer querySelector and querySelector all. They're newer. They solve the exact same problem. And instead of like passing in a tag name or class name or an ID name, you pass in a CSS selector. So you could do that. You could do like, anything you can do in CSS to select an element, you can do with querySelector and querySelector all. I think they're way better.
So querySelector will return one thing.
Yes.
QuerySelector all will return.
We'll always return an array. So this will always return a single node. QuerySelector all will always return an array of nodes, even if only one matches. And if multiple match on querySelector, it'll only return the first one. Okay, so I've acquired the main element here. Any guesses what I have to do now? I've already done it once. I need to append child to main. And watch the screen. DOM manipulation. That's how that works. So you can imagine, you could also write this out in a script. And so that like when this thing happens, manipulate the DOM in this way.
Do you not need the $sign in front of var paragraph text because it's not an element?
It's just like, it's not an element, and you don't need the $sign in front of anything. By convention, you put it in front of elements, and I didn't do it with the text node because it's not an element. I don't think I would yell at anybody for doing that, but I don't.
So I get what we're doing here and how this works.
Yes.
I guess I'm missing the step between why you wouldn't just create a new paragraph in your HTML, refresh the page.
Sure.
Like I'm just saying why you want to go this way.
Sure. So imagine it's dynamic content where like I have an ever-growing list of students or something like that. I could type out every student name ahead of time, or I can access a like a student's API that's being served up by somebody's Express app, and then when that request comes back, I can build a whole bunch of list items with those student names and populate it in. For example, if I look at this is how we grade your guys' stuff. This list of students and this list of standards, all of these are based on actual submissions. It's not every student's name or every standard or every assessment. It's only stuff that we don't have graded yet. I don't know what that is ahead of time. I can't hard code that into the HTML. What I can do is make a request to the spreadsheet over the network, wait for it to come back, and when it does come back, make a bunch of options for the select with all of the content I get back. That make sense? You might also consider something like think like modern email, Gmail and the like, where the stuff's coming in real time. You don't know what emails you're going to have ahead of time. You can't write those into the HTML. And I think of Gmail as like the ultimate single-page app. It really kind of started the single-page app thing. And what that means is that your page actually only gets loaded one time at the beginning. When you click on a different tab, when you go to the help page, and you do any of these things, it never actually loads a new HTML page. All it does is replace shit in the DOM. So there aren't multiple HTML pages for Netflix, Hulu, Gmail, any of these things. It's just an index HTML. Everything that has the appearance of being multiple pages is just taking shit out of the DOM and putting new shit in. Why would you want to do that? Why not just have multiple pages?
Faster?
Much faster, like insanely faster. Because if I want to go to some different tab in Gmail, I can already have that shit like ready to go, loaded up, just waiting for me to click the button. Versus every time you go to a new HTML page on the web, HTML pages are what we call stateless. It doesn't know anything about where you came from, what your intentions are. It treats every request as its own separate thing. And so it needs to make a completely new request across the network, wait for the shit to come back, build the DOM tree from scratch. It's slow as hell. You always know you're on a site like that because you click it, like the screen goes white for a second, and then the new shit comes in. Whereas when you're using something that feels like an app, it's just this seamless thing. Sometimes it animates the transitions. It's because it's all technically one page.
Wouldn't it be slower to load initially? Or would it sacrifice some time? I'm assuming if it's a bigger thing, it's loading a lot of stuff at once, so that it's easily...
Yes, that is the trade-off, is that you're basically downloading an entire app down to your browser. So yeah, your first load is hella slower than it would be with HTML.
You can't like background render.
So it can. That's a Spiral 3 kind of question. So, but like, suffice to say that that is the trade-off, and that's why there's plenty of server, what we call server rendered stuff, where it is really just bringing you a new HTML page every time, and it is a stateless request. Wikipedia works that way. WordPress blogs all work that way. It's way cheaper. Your first content load is way faster. They're easier to manage. They're like less easy to hack. There's use cases for separate pages, but they'll never feel like an app. Other questions about why the hell we want to manipulate the DOM? Cool. So let's do this. What I want you guys to do is go to any news site. So you go to New York Times, anything. And what I want you to do is figure out how to target any of these headlines, any of these articles, any of the stuff in the header up here. Capture it with the DOM. Try appending a new text node to it. Try changing what the existing text is. Make a completely new article and append it to one of these containers. Give that a shot. You can also see if you can figure out how to remove a node.
So to start, you're just going into the console. You have to
Yeah, that's what I'm
like initialize something from there.
You can just go in the console and look at the elements, and then you can drill down to what you're targeting. Find a class on it or whatever.
I keep forgetting to send this out to you guys. My purchases. And we talked about the lower acquisition costs with the level because of the lower friction. This is my talk at Tech. And because hybrids are a half solution. So they take on the benefits of native, but they also keep their downsides. You're still developing for a specific platform. You still have all that install friction. You're still cutting Google and Apple into the center. And you're still just doing this like translation layer, which, even if you can minimize the performance cost, is unnecessary.
selector, you have to use like the dot for classes.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Hashtag for.
Mine just had a kill set on it.
Selected this list. I used subscribe link. And then I did dot first element child. Now let me select this. You didn't have a class.
So is doing it that way, the query selector, how different is that than
Oh, that one was
just
wrong.
going into the elements
That
and
one
double
was
clicking on the text to like alter the text?
It's basically the same thing, except you don't have, like, if you're trying to do this with a script, you can't double click on the elements in Chrome DevTools.
Yeah, I don't think dollar sign should matter. I mean, it's just a variable name.
Yep, that is accurate.
Yeah, so then go and use the class. Because it's a class, features headline. And you can do like dot.
Yeah.
No, dots. Or yes, yeah. Yeah, quotes.
And so this is basically the dot.
That's so dumb. I just made myself laugh.
Cakes from hell. I wasn't sure if that was just the title of it.
Three gorgeous cakes for the holidays.
Can you scroll up so we can see how you did your cakes from home?
Yeah.
So if it already has
Starting
a text
here.
node, you can
So it's
just
a,
do that.
Mhm.
Class, yeah.
Yep.
So basically it does it however you select that specific, which I guess like
I do heading, style, color. Made it red too. Wow. Oh, interesting. I'm gonna make it bold now. See if they have a bold font loaded. Bold. Awesome.
Gorgeous cake by Kyle Coberly. Cake by Kyle.
From hell!
Would you help me with this?
Hmm?
Would you help me with this a little?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, I'm trying to say I did this. I mean, I obviously know how to do it directly here, but, okay, so I want to grab this class, feature headlines.
Yep.
And then just be able to do like.
Hang on, you're getting errors all over the place.
Right.
So read the error. So you know what you do. Yep.
So.
You have equals in two places.
Variable, so.
All right.
Okay.
Now you're one step closer.
Maybe they just didn't fit.
Oh, nice. So why did
I think it's because a pen child just like adds another text node rather than like changing the one that's already there.
Indeed. Want to change the one that's already there, you need to grab it and then do something with it. If you want to change the text in it, dot text content. Want to change the style, dot style, dot color, dot background color, dot whatever. If you want to get rid of it, document.remove child, and then whatever the element you got was.
So if I wanted to target this headline here, it's in this div, and there's I can't find like a good, because these classes are on a bunch of different things.
So this is part of the hard thing. So worst case scenario, you can do something like query selector all, and then specifically get the fifth match or something like that. You do query selector and use nth child to like target the fifth child or something like that.
Okay.
If you can't find something unique, for something like this though that has like an href that's probably unique, you can target something by its like href value. It's exactly what I did for this, because like this had the class of image.
Yeah.
That's not helpful. So what I did was this.
Oh.
Give me an image who has a source value equal to this.
So give me an A that has an href value equal to this.
Yes.
Oh, great. Oh, it went away. It updated?
Kill set. Fucking kill set.
So is that like they know you're messing with their site?
No, that's probably like they auto refresh on some interval. Probably because like that's how they can trick Firefox into thinking they got more page impressions than they actually did. Ad tech is an interesting part of this business.
So the syntax on that is query selector A and the
So
rows and brackets.
it takes a string. That was the thing that I screwed up when I was doing this. So then an open square bracket, and then whatever like attribute you want to target, like href, equals whatever value. So you have to run them all together. So no space between the f and the equals. I don't think after. And then put a big quote.
Very honest, so we're not creating a variable.
Around,
Yes, paragraph that we created.
Around
and
this
the child.
Nope. This where the HTTPS is,
Yeah, this
and then
one.
close. Yep.
Injection.
This
Yep.
and that.
Yep.
So now if I console on Pancake, it should.
Yep.
You text, you were text.
So it keeps happening.
Because it's, yeah, of course, because we're not writing out a string.
Cool. So it'll show that now. So now you can do the same
Is it possible that it's
where.
there's like another query selector or something added into that? It's not exactly
Oh,
match.
In order to get the link, I clicked on it because I
What do
couldn't.
we call it?
So,
There we go.
Use the
and
elements
then
maker.
we'll just do new paragraph.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, not the same thing.
Okay.
So what I would do is double click on this. Cool.
Cool.
And just copy that.
This way, what you
Just press up to get your.
I mean,
I just swap out the
should they smooth out that?
Did you say that you assigned a class to something that didn't have a class?
But you did it.
Yeah.
If you want to assign something that, give it a new class, you mean?
Yeah, like
You
I
can just
want to
literally go
edit
in here.
a different header, but they're all like class, like story header, so I can't get to that one. And I tried to put this in.
So you can do that a couple ways. One way you can do it is with like
Is that the same thing?
nth child is like your selector. So like I get 5 things back to the third one. You can do it that way. You can do it by clear selector all, and then like give me the third array index for that. Or the other way, what me and Emily did, is find something that's unique about that, like this href.
So
You can target that
that
process.
you
You say, give me an anchor tag that has an href equal to this.
So,
And then you can just write inside that.
It's funny because this is
So,
all featured.
You did query select. You did query selector.
But it
You
didn't
pass in
append
a
it
tag.
there, append
It's
it
not.
here.
What you actually wanted to do was not open a tag there for that,
Query select all.
and then right after the A, you're gonna open a square bracket. Oh, no space. Yep. There you go. And then it's gonna be href. No space after the href. Just like that. Now you can't have a quote there and a quote there. One of them needs to be full. Cool. And then you gotta kind of close it out. Correct.
without the string.
Yep, kill that. Make sure you get your, so you have that in a single quote. Okay, you still have that angle bracket there. And all we care about, get rid of the text on it. Don't care about that. Good. Okay. So we need the little one to close, and then the square bracket, and then this, and then the parentheses. Yeah, try that. Cool. Something like that. There you go.
I
Hmm?
don't know what I'm doing wrong still.
Okay.
So I got this exactly, make sure it ends with a slash.
Okay.
I'm so happy to see them.
Still haven't found it. This is on the front page of the Washington Post.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what I can do. Got it back. So take a look at what I did.
So I set it to a variable.
Oh. What? Interesting. The plot thickens. I wonder, does it still have the methods on it? Cool, still works. You just can't console log it, apparently.
Oh, okay.
So can you upload a new picture to this picture?
So what it's looking for in a picture for like that SRC value is the URL to a picture.
Okay.
Could be anywhere. And in fact, since we're just like doing it all, you could probably use a local address too, like a file URL, or if you're hosting it with a HTTP server or something, I'll bet that'll work.
So how do you, I'm assuming you create an image
Mm-hmm.
element
Yep,
and add a source attribute?
correct. So what that looks like, go back to Washington Post, and so what if instead of Mugabe, I want old Coberly in there. So what I might do, oops, first, let me see if I can, some way I can uniquely identify that picture. It doesn't really have anything on it other than the source. It's fine. So I'm going to target that.
I found if you right click on it, it has like a special copy function or choice.
Mm-hmm.
It'll copy its path.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
It sees its path.
Well, let's see. If I do document.query selector and say a href equals this and var. Okay, so if I do, oops, screwed this up somewhere. Shit. A source equals okay, and then I set that image's .src value to like a picture of me. Oops. Oops, I don't think I got it. Yeah, didn't find it. Let's try getting the CSS selector for it. Cool.
I feel like I've used dummies a lot on replacements.
There you go.
Oh, okay, cool. So you can just change it. You can just set it. to
Yep.
something else.
And like, check this out. So something like styles. Styles are just a bunch of like things that hang off of the style property. So if I copy the selector for that and do something like headline is document dot query selector And I set headline.style.color to red. Cool, now it's red.
Matches your picture more.
Yes. And I can also say headline.text content equals something cheerier. And I could say style dot font weight. Like, so instead of the dash syntax on this, it does it JavaScript camel case style. And I set the font weight of that to 700. I don't think they have the 700 weight loaded. Maybe 300? There we go. Thin it up a little bit.
And
So, go ahead.
So all those that stuff, like I just tried to do text content, but I did lowercase c, so it didn't work. So I figured
Yes.
it out and I did that. So how do we look up those terms?
Great. So if you go to MDN, we'll look up the document object model. So there's all of these, they say DOM interfaces here. So if we look up something like element, it's got all this cool shit on here. Like, where's the text content? All these neat things we can do with it. Text. Oops, it's a different API. Oh, is text content not on there? Is it maybe on? Probably like child node as distinct from any of the other node classes. Let's see, where is text content? Could it be on node? I bet it's on node. There you go. Returns or sets the textual content of an element and all of its descendants. So how this works, it says these are interfaces. Something can be more than one of these. And so it gets that like text content property from like the node. It might also be an element. The ones of these that I would concern myself with if I were y'all are document. Probably. Let me see if this is the same as. Nope, never mind. Take it back. You should concern yourself with element, node, URL someday. It's really nice for building URLs for fetch, but otherwise I wouldn't worry about it too much. Yeah, this is probably where you're going to get most of your action from. So much stuff. Yeah, this is the, and now I think it's official because I think W3C said that MDN is like the official source for all this. But this is the user manual for the DOM. Cool. Questions? Yep.
Can you explain what an API is, or is that too good without it?
So it is a big topic. What I'll say. Yes. Who knows what it stands for? What's API stand for?
Application Programming Interface.
Yep. So if I want to program something, it is the interface by which I can do that. So people casually use the term API generally to mean web service, which is like the best description I've ever heard of a web service is it's a function that's running on somebody else's computer. So you can say, give me all the Pokemon, and it gives you all the Pokemon back. You don't have the function definition for that. You just invoked it, and somebody else's computer ran it and gave you a list of Pokemon. Usually do that like over a network. So like the NFL API or the ESPN API are functions that will give you lists of data back. APIs can also let you add data to things. So like we have a bunch of APIs for things like adding students to the roster. So in this usage of the word, it just means a function that's on somebody else's computer, usually either returning or modifying data. More generally, an API, if you guys think back to like when we first started talking about programming, input, output, whatever the application is, the API is this and this. So what comes in, what comes out. All the rest of this is black box off. We don't know how the implementation of document.create node works. Doesn't matter. All I need to know is that when I call it and give it this thing, I get this thing back. That's its API. So somebody wanted to shit on a function that I wrote once, and they were like, it's a useful function, don't get me wrong, but your API design leaves a little bit to be desired. They're talking about the way that you pass the parameters in and like what comes out of it. Coincidentally, that person was not wrong. It was a gnarly ass API. Okay, so we have described the DOM. Any lingering questions on manipulating the DOM? Sweet. So there is one other aspect to the DOM that I want to talk about with you guys. But let's take a little bit of a break and let's just kind of treat that as a separate thing. But we're going to talk about DOM events before lunch. Cool. Thank you.